and you're chained to them, well, there's no place you're going to go. And you can scream. You know, you can scream to the Europeans, and if they come, because they don't really like to come down there because it smells so bad. But if they come down there because you are screaming, they're going to smack you a few times just to once again teach you a lesson. We don't want to hear it. You know, where you're trying to say, well, look, this guy's bleeding all over me. We don't want to hear it. So they're on the ship, and it takes 45 days to get them to the West Indies, or they came into Virginia. Virginia was a place where a lot of slaves came into, as was South Carolina. And after all of that, right, sold again. Okay, sold again. So now you got some new masters who have to teach new lessons, and they really have to drive their lessons down hard, because they're the ones who are going to sell you to the ultimate consumer. Where you understand, right? You the slave seller, and you're going to sell somebody to someone else. Well, you might have to warranty that this is a good slave who's going to listen, who's going to take good instructions. So that means you got to get that slave right. You got to make sure he's so afraid that whatever anybody tells him to do, he's going to do. So there's a whole new process of victimization that goes on once they get to either the West Indies or to America. And then let's just say they're in America. Then they get sold finally to the people who are going to buy them. And once they're sold to the people who are going to buy them, right, they're going to work. You're talking about people who are going to work from sun up, actually from a couple hours before sun up to a couple hours before sundown, 6 days a week. They get Sunday off because the slave masters are good Christians, right? The Sabbath is a day of rest. So you get Sunday off, but the rest of it is hell. Now I'm assuming you know about slavery once they get here. That is our creation story. That is how my people came to be. I mean, literally, that was the experience of our ancestors. So this is the way black people come to America. We are the product of the greatest eugenics experience in the history of humanity. And our ancestors suffered more than any single group of ancestors ever. But they suffered on the African continent, and then they suffered during the transition, and then they suffered once they got here. This is how we started. And the transatlantic slave trade is eventually ended January 1 or December 31, 1807. Now from that point, 1807, you go into a period of domestic slavery. There's still some illegal transatlantic slave trading going on. But generally speaking, it's been cut off in the Americas, right? Why do you cut it off? Right, you know, well, think about it. If you end the transatlantic slave trade and you own slaves, what happens to the value of your slaves? Go up, because there's no more of them. There's no more of them coming. So ending the transatlantic slave trade made all the slave owners wealthier. That's why they ended it. Indeed, you got this story, when they tell the story about abolition, because when we finally get to the North, it starts to end slavery.
The blue market.
Okay. What they do, and Pennsylvania is always the best example of this, but it's kind of fascinating when you hear about it. What they did was they said, look, 20 years from now, all slaves will be free in Pennsylvania. And they were the first ones to adopt an abolition law. 20 years from now, all slaves will be free. And so what do you do if you're the owner of a slave as the 20-year date approaches? Right? You march your slaves down to some place in the South and you sell them. Right? You don't free them and lose all your money, right? You just, okay, that means you got to leave Pennsylvania. And this was the idea. This was the idea in the North. Gradual manumission, gradually abolishing the slaves means they go down south. We get rid of the black people. We get rid of the black people.
How much are they worth about then?
I think well, of course, once again, the ones who are worth the most money are your males ages 18 to 22. The ones who can work the hardest. Once they start getting over 22, once they start getting older, the value starts to drop. The kids are cheaper because you got to put all that. You got to spend all that money right before you can start recuperating some of your investment. Because these kids, you can't stick them out there in the field, or if you do, they're just not very productive. And Lord, right, old people. I mean, it's just you can't sell an old person, right? Because all you're doing is somebody's buying trouble. Oh, I got to have medical care, spend money. No. So and it's, of course, with the women, right? The prettier you are, the more you're worth. Now, the uglier you are, okay, you're gonna be out in the field. You're gonna be in this hot sun all day, picking cotton. But if you're pretty, you might be good enough to come into the big house.
Wait, Thomas Jefferson?
Right. Where the master and the master's sons have access to you. And of course, if the master has access to you, the mistress hates you. So when the master's not around, you're gonna catch hell from the mistress. But that's what goes on. This is what you're looking at through this 1807 to 1861 period. And as you come into the Civil War, something like 93% of blacks are in the Confederacy. And of those who are in the Confederacy, 90% are slaves. So something on the order of 85% of black people in the country as you come to the Civil War are slaves. They are free up north. Up north there is not slavery, but down south there is. And now we have this beginnings of war, right? Lincoln is elected president. Right? And you should read some of this. Lincoln was one of the greatest orators I think we've ever had. And he was about as clear about his thinking as any person could possibly be. Lincoln's running. And the idea among the Confederacy, the people in the South, is that Lincoln's for abolition. Because Lincoln had said, right, a nation divided against itself cannot stand. Our nation is half free and half slave. And I do not expect the nation to split apart, but I do expect that the nation will cease to be half free and half slave. Well, if you're a slave owner, this sounds like a man whose ultimate plan is the end of slavery. So Lincoln gets elected president with the least of 38%. 38% of the popular vote. Lincoln was elected president with the least amount of votes of any president in U.S. history. He doesn't even appear on the ballot in the southern states. Not even on the ballot. Right? I mean, you just went through Obama's election. Imagine, Lincoln was so unpopular. There's no sense even campaigning in Mississippi, Arkansas, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, Texas. No even reason to try. Virginia. Lincoln gets elected. The South takes this as a sign that things in their country are going to go wrong. So they start their own country. They separate and start the Confederacy. Now, right, little told story, right? But if you're Confederates and you're waging this war and you think you're gonna win, what do you think is going through their minds after they win?